Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 6 of NFL on DraftKings. Finally here, as salaries were delayed by like 2 whole days, and we actually were trying to make lineups with the Tuesday through Sunday that was missing 2 games on the Sunday slate, and then they finally just now released the actual 11 game Sunday slate that had the corrected games that got changed by the NFL because of the COVID scheduling issues. And a couple of the salaries changed from those Tuesday, Sunday slates. So we were looking at possibly having somebody like Alexander Madison at 6,100. His price has been bumped. We'll get to him in just a minute. We have some very interesting running back values on this slate. I think that we're going to be able to get our 65 plus touches at running back, if not 70 plus, depending on you want to go to. I think there's probably 5 or 6 running backs that I would consider cash game viable for this week. And that's what we do on this video. We're not going to be doing a FanDuel first look this week because that's usually my Tuesday video. I do the DraftKings one on Monday. Everything's got pushed back. My whole schedule's gotten crunched for the week because of the late salaries, and I got to get to writing best buys for ESPN Plus. So we're going to have to do with just one first look lineup this week. And for those of you who play on FanDuel, just figure it out. It's not. FanDuel's been pretty easy because their salaries have been a lot softer than DraftKings. So if it works on DraftKings and the analysis works for you on DraftKings, it's probably also going to work for you on FanDuel. Just factor in the fact that there's no bonuses, factor in that it's half PPR versus full PPR, and make the same decisions that we talk about making every week. And we'll go over stuff more on FanDuel with the top stacks video that comes out every Thursday, and also on the lineup builder when people ask me questions every single Friday. So there's plenty of time for that sort of stuff. Okay? Appreciate you guys coming back for every video. Drop a like on this one. We expect about 20,000 views from this video, so that means I need over 2,000 likes. Even though my earpiece does not like being in my ear right now, it's up to you guys. I just want 1 like for every 10 person that watches the video, right? Not that much. 10% is all we ask for. If you're new to the channel, appreciate you finding the channel. Glad you're here. Stay a while. Subscribe to the channel, ring that notifications bell. I'll come out with a ton of content, both here and on the second channel where the recap video lives, and it's posted for week 5 if you want to go look at the autopsy for how everything went in week 5. Hop over to the second channel. There'll be a link right down below as the pinned comment to take you directly to that video. And thank you guys for the support over there as well. Let's go take a look at the salaries on DraftKings for week 6. We'll start at quarterback where we normally do. Lamar Jackson, people are going to complain. They're going to say, look, Lamar Jackson has seen some massive regression from last year. Guys, we kind of said that was going to be a thing because he clearly was going to see regression. He only ran the ball 2 times last week as they kind of got to pack it in against Cincinnati. Gus Edwards led the team in rushes or rush attempts last week. They really didn't have to do much to beat that team. But the 2 touchdown passes that Lamar Jackson threw were, chat, this is your fault. That's your fault, chat. Crimpy, thank you very much for the 3 months. Chat is supposed to remind me to turn off the alerts before we start recording a video, as all these videos are recorded live on Twitch and sometimes the alerts pop up. So I blame chat. They're saying they said it. Did you see him say it, YouTube? I don't think you saw him say it. If you didn't see him say it, YouTube, then they didn't say it. Anyway, back to Lamar Jackson. I think he's a great tournament play every single week because we can stack him with Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown and reliably know that they're going to get 50+% of the target market share. Andrews going to get a great amount of the end zone and red zone work. And he's running a ton more routes than he ran last year. Last year he was running like 50% routes per Lamar Jackson dropbacks. Last week, week 5, I think he ran 80% routes. So 80% is absolutely elite. We'll see if Lamar can get a little bit more consistent with his throws this year. He's too good not to. There is a 30-point week waiting to happen. He has not achieved that once this year. Last year, averaging 29 DraftKings points per game. This year so far, averaging only 20 DraftKings points per game. So I think that there might be an explosion coming sometime soon, and we know who we can pair him with. So not a cash game play for me. Definitely in play for tournaments. Aaron Rodgers has been doing outstanding. We'll get to something about him in a minute. Deshaun Watson has been a very good cash game play. Divisional matchup here against Tennessee. I think a lot of people are going to go back to him because they're going to have the salary to be able to do so. And I don't hate it. He's just not running as much as he used to run, so that floor isn't there. So you're more dependent on him throwing multiple touchdowns in games. which is certainly possible, but it's not like this Houston offense has been clicking this season the way that they had before. Now, granted, we said that they had played 4 extremely tough defenses in weeks 1 through 4: Kansas City, Baltimore, at Pittsburgh, and Minnesota. But like, Minnesota hasn't been a really great defense. He put up 23 fantasy points. Jacksonville, not a great defense, 29 fantasy points. So like, maybe we're back on the road where Deshaun's going to average 24, 25 points a game. At 7K, I think that price is somewhat fair, but not really a smash. Ben Roethlisberger, pretty consistent. You know what you're getting from him. Multiple touchdowns every game this year so far, but no game over 25 points because he's only reached the bonus one time. He hasn't been really forced to really go over the top or chase, right? Like, this defense, they're playing from ahead most times, which leads them to play slow down ball in the second half, run the ball a lot, bleed the clock. If you predict a shootout, which a lot of points are projected for this game, I believe that the total on this game is 51. The Steelers favored by 3.5. So we know that he can get it done in the air. We know that he's got some fantastic tools at his disposal. If Deontay Johnson can be in a game and actually stay healthy, Chase Claypool, the emergence of him last week. We know that Juju Smith-Schuster is very good. Eric Ebron, great around the goal line. He's got some backs that can actually catch the ball as well. So a lot of paths to multiple touchdowns on most weeks for Ben Roethlisberger. I think that he's in play at 6,700, but I think that there's some better values on the board. I'm going to start with Cam Newton. I don't want to match Cam Newton with his wide receivers. I'm not looking to stack him unless they are underdogs, unless it's a game where they're going to have to throw it a bunch, right? Like, those are the games where we're going to look to stack him. I do think that this is a week that you can roster Cam Newton in cash games and not deal with a stack. Naked Cam Newton, if you will. Because of the rushing floor, because of how many times they're running him in games. Look, yes, he's been on the COVID list for a few weeks, but they believe that he could be eligible to suit up. If he is eligible to suit up, I am interested in rostering Cam Newton for this game. They are favored in this game, so Vegas agrees that he should be able to play. 8.5 point favorites in this one at home. I think he's fine for cash. I think he needs to run for multiple touchdowns for him to be tournament viable, but that's always in play. And then you just work on your stacks in other ways. You don't need to stack him with wide receivers most weeks. Couple other guys that I wanted to mention, both from the same game. Gardner Minshew has been very, very fine, right? Averaging more points per game than Lamar Jackson. He's been fine. He turns the ball over a bunch, right? At least one turnover in every game except week 1. So I'm fine with you playing defenses against him. I wouldn't really play Detroit against most people because they don't get a lot of pressure on the passer, but any defense that does put pressure on the opposing passer, Minshew does tend to turn it over a lot and take some sacks. But he throws for multiple touchdowns and is a threat to run in most games. He has enough wide receivers that can do things, from DJ Chark to Conley to Laviska. He's got a very reliable, if not aging, tight end in Eifert. There are plenty of different weapons at his disposal. 300-yard bonus, 3 of the last 4 weeks, multiple touchdowns, now facing a Detroit defense that, as I said, should not put a lot of pressure on him, which will allow him to hopefully make some good decisions, but pressure doesn't always lead to, you know, we said this against Kyler Murray as well, that they don't pressure, but like, they still got interceptions. They just sat in their zones and Kyler made mistakes. So if Minshew makes mistakes, there's a path to turnovers here for Minshew, just like there is every single week. But more realistically, there is a path to him finding the open guy, as he's been a very efficient quarterback, and efficiency is the number one thing with quarterbacks that leads to fantasy scoring. He's been efficient this year. And on the other side of the ball, Matthew Stafford facing that Jacksonville defense, who really hasn't done much to stop anybody. And I think that this is a game that he can actually go off, as we've been streaming pass game offenses against Jacksonville. So I think that it's up to Minshew or down to Minshew or Stafford here as my first look quarterback. I'm going to go with Stafford because I think that his pass catchers have the ability to get into the end zone, and they do target that a lot, as their running backs do lack some desirables, let's just say. Aaron Jones is outstanding, but he goes up against Tampa Bay. I don't really like playing running backs against Tampa Bay. I also think that based on the pricing at running back on DraftKings this season, this whole season, that you have to focus on getting yourself 65, if not 70 combined touches from the 3 running backs that you're going to play in cash. And based on the pricing, you can certainly get there. I think that it might be tough for us to get there with Aaron Jones on the road. He definitely has ceiling ability. I will have shares of him in tournaments, but I don't think that he is a cash game play for me, at least not at this point, because I think that there's some other guys that are cheaper who project for more touches, and I'm more concerned with floor, reasonable floor from my running backs, and volume is king. Derrick Henry, King Henry, is also one of the kings of volume, and he's got a few weeks off and goes up against Houston, who's been really bad against opposing running backs. I don't mind you going with him, but the floor of targets isn't really there for Derrick Henry. He's got to get himself into the end zone for him to have kind of a smash game, where other players on the slate who are a little bit cheaper, like Mike Davis, 7K, can get you 29 points without scoring without getting himself into the box. He had, without that touchdown, 23 points, because of the amount of work that he gets in the passing game. 10 targets in week 5, 6 targets in week 4, 9 targets in week 3 as the starting running back. We have a very good expectation of 20 plus touches here. They are playing at home. This is not a super high totaled game, but you don't really need it to be for Mike Davis to have you a very, very good game. The price has come up from 6,400. So he's right there on that cusp where if you want to go with Henry at 73, I'm fine with it. If you want to go with Alexander Mattison, who's filling in for Dalvin Cook, one of the highest volume inside the 5 running backs in the league, Dalvin Cook going into this week already had 7 rushing touchdowns on the year, was leading the league in terms of that. And now he's got this groin injury where he's going to miss at least 1 game. So now we get Alexander Mattison, who's going to slide into his role. I'm kind of hoping that Mattison against Atlanta, who has given up the most targets and receptions to opposing running backs on the year, sees a little bit more usage in the passing game than what the Vikings have been sending the way of their running backs, whether it's Mattison or Cook or both. They haven't really involved them in the passing game as much as they did last year. Again, 20 plus touches is certainly possible here. I'm going to go with the floor play in Mike Davis. And as I said, there's multiple running backs you could play. I think that Henry is cash game viable. I think that Mattison against Atlanta is certainly cash game viable. I'm going to go with Mike Davis against Chicago, knowing that this is not as good a matchup as the other two, but the volume in the passing game gives him such a tremendous floor. Counting on 6+ catches is massive. We spiked and nailed exactly what we wanted to nail with Kareem Hunt last year. Now he goes up against Pittsburgh and on the road. I do expect 20 touches out of him, but the matchup isn't great. And I mean, we said he'd get about 60% of the touches. He got 60.6% of the, 60% of the running back rushes on Cleveland, and he got 60.6% of the rush game market share. So he's right where we think he's going to be. He's a bell cow back, good for tournaments, not exactly the best cash game play. Robinson, if you want to get shares of him against Detroit's awful rush defense, I'm fine with that. But again, I think that there's guys that are cheaper. Miles Sanders against Baltimore, probably not the route that I'm going to go. Taylor, I wish that he played more. Just why this? Why 12? Come on, Frank, get it together, man. He's been really touchdown lucky, or like his fantasy points have been buoyed by the amount of touchdowns that he's scored, which isn't something that we want to hang our hat on. What we want to hang our hat on is volume. And Joe Mixon in the last 2 weeks has gotten all of it, as the Bengals have kind of phased out the Gio Bernard experience or experiment here this year, where the first 3 weeks of the year that they were, basically just handing the ball to Joe Mixon. They weren't throwing the ball to Joe Mixon. Anytime that they got in long down or distance, or they got into 2-minute drill situations, they were playing Gio Bernard on all third downs, on all 2-minute drills. And every sort of passing down second and long, they were getting him in there as well. In the last 2 weeks, I said, you know what? F it. Let's just put Joe Mixon in there and see what he can do. And all of a sudden, look at there. Joe Mixon, 30 touches each of the last 2 weeks. Against Jacksonville, he had a ceiling game. For 30 touches, he got about a half point per touch at running back against a really tough defense with a really great defensive line, against Cincinnati's really bad offensive line. And he still had 15 DraftKings points. Let's just say that his floor is probably, if he gets 30 touches, his floor is probably 12 or 13 points this week, which is about 2x his salary. We know what his ceiling is because we saw it in week 4 against Jacksonville. If he falls somewhere in between here, and for 6.2K, Joe Mixon gets you somewhere in the meat of the bell curve that's like 17 to 22 points. You aren't going to be upset with that. The key is the volume. If it remains the same as it has the last 2 weeks, Joe Mixon is extremely viable in cash games, but you guys know me. I just don't really click him. I am going to click Madison. And that's going to bring us to our third round. Because like I said, I still think that we're going to get 20 plus touches out of Madison. And the matchup is just too good here. But my primary is going to be Mike Davis. The third one, we can find a couple of running backs that are cheaper. David Montgomery was the cover boy. I love the amount of volume that David Montgomery has gotten in the passing game since Tariq Cohen went out for the season. So this is putting him in a situation where we can actually get after David Montgomery at 5,800 against the defense that we always want to stream running backs against this year, the Carolina Panthers. I'm not going to put him in this lineup because I have Mike Davis. If you want to go Henry and Madison and come back with Dave Montgomery here, if you've got Mixon in there and you don't want to double up in your cash games on running backs from the same game, I think it's fine to do that if both of them are pass catching backs where they're game flow independent for tournaments. But in terms of this lineup, I think Dave Montgomery very, very viable. I think that you should be playing him in tournaments. I think he's cash game playable, but I'm not going to play him in the same cash game lineup where I have Davis. So I'm going to avoid him for this lineup. What I am going to find is a really good value play right here who has gotten us 26 and 20 touches the last 2 weeks. Tales of his demise have been greatly exaggerated with basically 40 fantasy points the last 2 weeks. 3 catches against Chicago, 6 catches against the Chargers. Now they catch Green Bay, who has not been stellar against opposing running backs. And Ronald Jones has looked really good. Yeah, he gets a case of the dropsies here and there. And, you know, that's just going to be part of the Ronald Jones experience. But 5.6 yards per carry in week 4, 6.2 yards per carry in week 5, 20 touches per game for 6K is just entirely too cheap at home against Green Bay. Games should be high scoring. Games should be close. And there should be plenty of opportunity for him there. Let's just plug in a random defense like we always do. They're the Dolphins at home against the Jets. That's actually pretty viable, so I'm okay with that. Let's go to tight end. We'll start there before we get back to the wide receivers. I mentioned how much I like Mark Andrews for tournaments. 6,500, running just a truckload more routes per dropbacks than he ran last year. That leads to more opportunities. 9 targets against Cincinnati, 8 targets against Kansas City. And this was in a blowout game. So the usage that he's getting, especially the usage in the red zone and the end zone, makes him a must stack for me every week in tournaments. Whether I'm playing, 5 lineups, 10 lineups, or 150 lineups, you want to have some shares of Lamar Jackson with either or both of Marquise Brown or Mark Andrews. TJ Hawkinson, I think, is a play that's going to be popular this week. Again, attacking this Jacksonville defense with Hawkinson, who has seen an increased market share both in the end zone and overall. It's fluctuating. I think that we can do better for cash games just based on volume, which is tight end is usually a space where I look to save a little bit. JONNU Smith, depending on who's in or out at wide receiver, and we won't know that until later in the week. So monitor the injury situations or the COVID situations that are going on with Tennessee. If they're down a couple of wide receivers, then you're obviously going to boost JONNU Smith as his target market share will increase, as opposed to if they have everybody. If they have AJ Brown and Davis and all of their pass catchers and JONNU Smith, then JONNU Smith is fine. If they're missing AJ Brown and they're missing somebody else as a part of their pass catching unit, then JONNU Smith kind of gets elevated a little bit. Evan Engram, I'm washing my hands of you. He might have a good game. I'm washing my hands of you. Hunter Hurst Helmsley. Targets are there. Matt Ryan's inefficiency has kind of, like we talked about Haskins induced inefficiency. Now we have Hayden Hurst, Double H, giving us Matt Ryan induced inefficiency, which is really weird to say because that's not been a thing. At 4,700, I think that he's in play, but obviously there's some danger there. Eric Ebron, I think, has a really good floor. His price has not spiked. We did not see a touchdown from him, but 5, 7, and 6 targets in each of the last 3 weeks is extremely viable here. Looking at a couple of cheaper guys, there's one that's super cheap that I think is going to bounce. And like, I get it if you want to play an absolute minimum salary tight end, like Irv Smith, but like, understand that if you play him, there is a realistic expectation that he gets 0 or 1 catches in a game. Just have that on your mind. Just realize that like some weeks he's going to do well, like against Seattle, and they're really bad, but also realize that this could be a situation where he gets you 0 catches on 1 target. So consider him, understand that you may be getting a bagel here, or you might be getting 10 points, and 10 points for 2,500 is good. Finding a couple of more guys that might be cheap for us. There's one here at 3,100. I love the usage of Trey Burton. They love Trey Burton in Indy, and you have a quarterback who probably can't get the ball to the outside as much and really looks at the guys underneath. So Trey Burton's usage, now that he is back and healthy, 5 targets and 6 targets for 3,100, is viable for me. I think it's somebody that we have to look at. And I said I was going to talk about him. So basically he's been redacted. So and that's all I've got to say about that. So I'm probably just going to go with Ebron here, and then we'll move on to the wide receivers. If you want to play Burton, that's fine too. But let's look at some wide receivers. I think that you're not going to probably pay up here in cash games. I don't think that's going to happen. So Davante Adams should be back this week, and any one of these high salaried wide receivers is going to be in play. Right? If you want to play one of them, you probably have to go down to somebody like Burton or Irv to get them into your lineups. And I'm fine with that. If that's the route that you want to go, you probably have to punt with the Bengals defense, which may not be a terrible way to go. As much pressure as they're getting on opposing quarterbacks, and they're the cheapest defense on the board. You can accept that variance in your cash games. That's fine. Same goes for Ridley, who's been an absolute monster all season long, regardless of whether Julio's there or not. He's been a beast. Allen Robinson, an absolute target monster since they changed to Nick Foles at quarterback. He was getting 9 targets a game with Trubisky there, but like all of his, what was the stat? I said this a couple weeks ago. He caught like 100% of the balls that were thrown on target, and all of his non-catches were off target throws. So he had 8 catches through the first 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks he's caught 27 balls with Nick Foles. So Allen Robinson at 7K, I still think is too cheap, and I'm not going to use him in this lineup, but I understand that he's cash game viable. I think there's a lot of routes that we can go in cash games this week, and I'm kind of trying to focus on guys that are maybe a little bit lower priced that still have an opportunity of getting us 8+ targets. So Smith-Schuster, I understand he had a dog of a game this weekend, but I think he's a superstar wide receiver, obviously. Marquise Brown, great for tournaments. Love to see that Odell Beckham Jr. is actually getting targeted a little bit more recently. He had a massive game in week 4, but this is a running team now, so he's nothing more than a tournament play for me. Devontae Parker had a kind of a not great game. He did catch a touchdown, which salvaged it a little bit. Now he catches the Jets, who can't defend anything. Robbie Anderson, Chicago's pretty good against the pass. We're going to test whether Robbie Anderson is the volume guy. This, if he gets 10+ targets, he should pay off this 6,300. I believe that he's in play, but I'm going to go with Kenny Golladay, who's been solid in the games that he's played. Gets enough targets, has good touchdown equity, and now we get Jacksonville, who has allowed everybody to be extremely efficient at catching the ball when you throw it against them. DJ Moore only got 5 targets last week, did catch a touchdown. I prefer Anderson to Moore, just like I preferred him to Moore last week. Terry McLaurin, though, F1, coming off of a week where he was facing Ramsey, now he's not. My mom said, can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all. So this week he faces the Giants, and the Giants don't have Ramsey. They don't have Jalen Ramsey. And Terry McLaurin's 5,700, which is the lowest price that he's been since week 1. So I'm going to play him. at least in this lineup, because the Giants don't have Jalen Ramsey. That leaves us 4,600. So we got to look for a little bit of value to finish off this lineup. That puts us down here in this range. I do like T. Higgins. If you want to come down on the defense to go get yourself some T. Higgins, that's fine with me. I want everybody healthy, though, which means I want AJ Green and I want Boyd out there, because I think that T. Higgins is going to emerge, especially with the usage that he's getting. 6, 9, 7, and 8 targets. That usage has been extremely good for him. I think that a big bust out game could be coming in terms of catches and yardage, not unlike we saw from Jefferson on Minnesota a few weeks ago. And Jefferson's usage kind of cooled off after that game, getting like 5 targets a game, where everybody thought, oh yeah, he's going to be the greatest wide receiver of all time, and he might be really good, but like he's not getting the usage consistently the way that T. Higgins is getting. Golden Tate, meh, like whatever. Fulgham had himself a big game. You're going to pay 4,400 for Fulgham if there's no wide receivers remaining. Caught a touchdown in both of the last 2 weeks. Big bodied dude. 13 targets seems like it's not going to be sustainable for him. I don't care how many injuries there are for the Eagles, but 6, 7, 8 doesn't seem out of the realm. But like quality of targets is going to matter as well. And I think that Marquez Valdes-Scantling, MVS, if you will, is going to see a lot better targets as the number 2 guy for Aaron Rodgers than if he was the number 1 guy. So with Davante Adams coming back and getting double coverage, as you must double cover Davante Adams, and his 30% of the market share, that still leaves 15 to 17% of the market share for MVS, where he can do the things that he's great at, like getting down the field while allowing, Davante to work the short, underneath, and intermediate stuff. Then they can stretch the field when they find one-on-one coverage with MVS, and Aaron Rodgers has been doing a great job this year. I think that with Lazard out, 7+ targets, not out of the realm here. You're not going to get the massive catch rate because he's going to take more shots downfield, high ADOT targets. But that volume of targets plus the big splash ability for the price that we have remaining makes him extremely playable for me here. So the lineup's going to end with Stafford, Mike Davis, Madison. Jones is our third running back, giving us about 70 expected touches. Golladay, McLaurin, and MVS giving me what I think is going to be about 25 targets. Eric Ebron gives us a good amount of targets there. And then the defense. Shuffle this around as you want. There's a lot of plays this week. A lot of guys that I think are in really good situations. So leave a reply to the video, like the video, click some damn thing, and look for another video here.
He's a legend.